Quick one. Last video hit over 100 comments, which is absolutely mind-blowing for this channel. Let's try that again for this video. Comment down what you think about these stories or just a hello and the team will reply. We always reply to the comments. As always, please like and subscribe and help this channel grow. Thank you. It had been about a week since I matched on Tinder with this girl named Lindsay. We hadn't talked much over that time, just exchanging a few casual messages saying, hey, or what's up. I didn't really know anything substantial about her other than her first name and the fact she had stressed she wasn't looking for hookups or a serious relationship. Lindsay said she was just on Tinder to expand her social circle and meet new people to casually hang out with. That sounded perfectly fine to me, as I was open to making new connections and friends. So I'll admit I was a little surprised when late Saturday night, Lindsay messaged me out of nowhere asking if I wanted to meet up. We hadn't had any deep or meaningful conversations yet at that point. I still felt she was a complete stranger despite our brief chats over the week, but I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, so despite my reservations about her still being an unknown entity, I agreed to her last-minute plan. She asked if I could pick her up and drive to a pub not far away that she liked. When we got there, I noticed there was a 2,000 rupee cover charge per couple to get in. Being a gentleman, I paid for the both of us without hesitation or thought. At the time, I figured it was a small price to pay for what I hoped would be a fun night out getting to know someone new. We settled into a cozy table and started off with a round of drinks to loosen up. The conversation was polite enough but stayed relatively surface level, neither of us revealing much personal information just yet. As we continued with a second round, I realized I didn't have my wallet on me or any cash for that matter. In my rush to get out of the house after her last-minute invitation, I had left without my wallet, unaware most places were now cash only due to the recent demonetization. I casually asked Lindsay if she might have any cash on hand so we could buy another round of drinks or some cigarettes, but she replied no, that unfortunately she didn't have any cash either. As the night wore on, I gradually noticed a pattern starting to emerge with Lindsay's behavior that gave me pause. This same girl who had initially claimed she just wanted to innocently meet new friends was happily ordering more and more lavish cocktails and appetizers, letting everything pile up on my bill without a second thought. And mind you, this was our first time even meeting each other in person. She barely knew my last name. I started to feel a creeping sense of irritation at being taken advantage of by someone I had literally just met. The generosity I had first shown by paying our cover charges in her first drink now felt like that she was exploiting. After another couple of rounds of drinks, with the beer starting to hit me, I decided I had to say something before our tab really got out of hand. How were you planning to pay me back for your share? I asked her point blank. Lindsay looked back at me, seemingly shocked and appalled that I would dare ask about my own money being spent. She replied indignantly that she had just naturally assumed this was a typical date night out between a man and woman, and therefore I, as the man, was expected to generously and chivalrously cover any expenses she incurred over the course of the evening. I frankly told her that I had never agreed to blindly foot the open-ended bill for a virtual stranger's increasingly exorbitant food and drinks orders. As a modern, independent woman in the 21st century, I asked, wasn't she perfectly capable of paying for her own items that she herself had ordered all night? I suggested we could simply split the bill down the middle to cover what each of us had consumed. She immediately became defensive at this notion, doubling down that dates inherently just included these kinds of costs for the man, and that I should already know and embrace that long-standing social expectation without complaint. She indignantly grabbed her purse, saying if I was really going to be so insultingly rude as to ask separate checks after initially offering to cover her, she would rather just leave right then so I could thoroughly enjoy the rest of this lovely night by yourself. I calmly told her she was free to go if she truly thought it fair or reasonable to stick me with the entire surprisingly hefty tab we had managed to run up so quickly. I had no desire to continue an evening with someone who thought a virtual stranger should foot the bill for her expensive tastes. I stayed behind and, truth be told, enjoyed the rest of the night alone without the pretense, having a few more affordable drinks and taking in the live band playing. I was perfectly content and relaxed in my own company rather than feeling used. In retrospect, the evening was extremely illuminating about Lindsay's true character. This girl that first claimed she just wanted to innocently make new platonic friends and expand her social circle. But in reality, her actions later that night, pushing to go to an upscale bar, dressing up ordering pricier cocktails and menu items without regard for cost, expecting me to pay without discussion. Told a very different story than her original stated intentions. She clearly had seen me as an old-fashioned gentleman who she could take advantage of by invoking outdated notions of chivalry and a man always paying on an ambiguous date. When I asked an honest question about paying for her extravagant consumption, she became immediately angry and indignant, as if I had morally offended her by daring to broach the topic. It was clearly an act on her part meant to exploit me without care or concern for prices on a night she thought would be free. I'm proud of how I ultimately handled the uncomfortable situation. I stood up for myself when I sensed disingenuous behavior rather than ignoring the red flags in the name of old-fashioned chivalry or worry about causing offense. I spoke my mind, and that in turn revealed her superficial motives and entitled nature. She had counted on me feeling too much pressure as a man to actually ask her to pay her share, despite us barely knowing each other and her ordering as if money was no object. Don't let yourself be manipulated by those playing on your politeness or gender roles. Trust your instincts, even if it means confronting hard truths about people's real intentions. This was undoubtedly a valuable lesson that people's stated good intentions don't always match their real ones. Actions and reactions ultimately speak louder than just words. Judge people by their character, not simply by their gender or your outdated assumptions. I'd never imagined I'd end up living through such a bizarre and unsettling situation because of using Tinder. I downloaded the app mostly to find attractive women to go on fun, casual dates with, and maybe hook up if we really hit it off. I wasn't looking for anything too serious at the time, just wanted to meet new people and have some exciting flings. But matching with Amanda turned into a way creepier encounter than I ever could have expected. Looking back now, I realize I should have picked up on some red flags from her profile that something might be off. But hindsight is 20/20ths. At the time, nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. Her photo showed a cute petite blonde girl who looked to be in her mid-20s. Her bio was vague but witty enough to make me chuckle. We matched and started messaging within the app. She was flirty and eager to meet up right away. I suggested getting drinks that weekend at a cool speakeasy bar downtown. She readily agreed to the date. When I arrived at the bar and spotted her waiting outside, I'm not going to lie, I was pleasantly surprised by how even prettier she was in person. The conversation flowed easily once we sat down with our cocktails. She laughed at all my dumb jokes and kept touching my arm flirtatiously. After a few more rounds, I worked up the nerve to invite her back to my place to hang out some more. Maybe it was the drinks, but she enthusiastically accepted. We took an Uber back to my apartment and were all over each other in the elevator ride up. As soon as I closed the front door, we moved to the couch and proceeded to start heavily making out. So far, so good. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, she abruptly pulled away and got unsettlingly serious. She told me we needed to stop for a minute so she could confess something important. Given her grave tone, I braced myself for her to admit she had a boyfriend or a disease she forgot to mention. But no, what she said next completely blindsided me. In a timid voice, she revealed that she was actually homeless and had been secretly living out of her car for months. I sat there in stunned silence trying to comprehend this bombshell admission. She went on to explain how she used Tinder to find guys to crash with whenever she desperately needed a place to stay. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. Just an hour ago, I thought I was on a date with a normal girl I met online. Yet here she was telling me she was practically destitute. Against my better judgment, when she begged to just stay one night until she figured something else out, I reluctantly agreed. In the moment, I felt too guilty leaving her stranded on the streets in the middle of the night. At first, things seemed fine. She thanked me profusely for my charity and tried to give me space. But over the next couple days, her behavior started growing increasingly odd. She began clinging to me constantly and would throw a fit of hysterics if I wanted to go somewhere without her. She also started buying stuff online and ordering expensive pay-per-view movies with my credit card without even asking me. When I confronted her about the unauthorized charges, she manipulatively gaslit me and somehow twisted it around to make me seem cold and unreasonable. By 2 weeks of this emotionally exhausting nonsense, I knew I needed to get her out of my apartment as soon as. When I firmly told her it was time for her to leave, she did not take it well at all. She flew into a rage and accused me of being heartless for abandoning her when she had nowhere else to turn. I held my ground and started gathering up her stuff to toss outside, but she became scarily volatile. Out of nowhere, she violently attacked me and scratched out my arms. I managed to shove her away and lock the front door behind her. She then proceeded to bang aggressively on the door for a solid 15 minutes while screaming profanities and disturbing threats at me. I considered calling the police, but eventually she tired herself out and left. I cautiously peered out the window to confirm she drove off in her beat-up car. My hands were still shaking from the sheer terror of her frenzy outburst. I immediately deleted my Tinder account, vowing to never online date again after such a traumatic encounter. In hindsight, I'm ashamed I didn't listen to my gut instincts sooner that something was off about Amanda. But I foolishly ignored all the red flags because of wishful thinking with my lower anatomy. I'm just thankful I got her out when I did before the situation escalated any further. She clearly had severe mental health issues, and in that crazed state, seemed capable of violence. I shudder imagining what could have happened if I had let her stay with me longer, or if I hadn't been able to overpower her attacks. She easily could have seriously injured me during her meltdown. From now on, I will be much more cautious and selective when meeting women from dating apps. No more being stupid just because there's a bad stuff. It's truly not worth risking myself again with someone unstable or predatory hiding sinister motives. I'd rather pass up a potential hookup than ignore warning signs and end up in another hazardous scenario, and I'll be sure to thoroughly vet someone in the future before ever bringing them to my home. You really can't be too careful with online dating these days. There are a lot of genuine wackos out there looking to take advantage of unsuspecting nice guys like me. But lessons learned, no more dates with randos from the internet. From now on, I'll stick to meeting women through safer social settings and circles. Wish me luck out there. It was a few years ago when I decided to download Tinder and try my hand at online dating. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship and thought it would be a good way to meet new people and get back into the dating scene. I was in my late 20s and figured a dating app would be a more modern way to make connections than going to bars or clubs. At first it was fun, swiping through profiles and matching with different women in my area. We would exchange some messages back and forth, and it seemed harmless enough. I went on a few first dates from Tinder that ultimately didn't lead to anything serious, but eventually I matched with a girl named Emily who really caught my attention. Her photos showed a gorgeous 21-year-old brunette with a bright smile and fun, flirty bio. We had an instant connection chatting online and made plans to meet up that weekend. When we met in person, I was blown away by how beautiful Emily was. She looked just like her photos, except even more stunning in real life. We grabbed some drinks at a bar downtown and had effortless conversation the whole night. She was smart, funny, and we just clicked right away. As the night went on, our flirting escalated and I started thinking how incredible it would be if this blossomed into a real relationship. After several more drinks, Emily suggested we get out of there and go back to my place. I was thrilled at the opportunity to spend more time with her and immediately paid the tab and got us an Uber. As soon as we got to my apartment, things got hot and heavy fast. We slept wrapped in each other's arms. I woke up the next morning feeling happy and optimistic about this new relationship. It had been so long since I had connected with someone like this. I rolled over excitedly to say good morning to Emily, but she wasn't there. Confused, I got out and searched my apartment to realize she had left without saying anything. My heart sank thinking I had done something wrong or she didn't share the same feelings I did about the night before. Over the next few days, I became more and more anxious waiting for her to return a text or call me. The possibilities ran through my head on repeat about why she ghosted me. Just when I had given up hope, there was a loud knock on my door one afternoon. I wasn't surprised to see two police officers standing there who asked if they could come in to ask me a few questions. My stomach immediately dropped, having no idea what this could be about. The officers sat me down and explained there had been an accusation of assault against me by Emily from the Tinder date several nights prior. I was completely blindsided and in utter shock. I vehemently denied the allegations and explained it was a consensual hookup between two adults after meeting on a dating app. The officers said they had to follow up on the report filed, but would continue to investigate. In that moment, my life changed forever. I was taken down to the station, booked, and placed under arrest. Even though I knew I had done nothing even close to illegal, I felt completely powerless. I was forced to take a leave of absence from work and spent months dealing with the looming criminal charges hanging over me. My reputation was ruined as word spread quickly in my social circles about what I had been accused of. I was utterly confused why Emily would claim assault after our encounter had been so intimate and passionate from my perspective. The next several months were the darkest period of my life. I fell into a deep depression spending so much time isolated at home, overwhelmed with the entire traumatic situation. My anxiety was crippling, worrying how I could end up in prison for years for a crime I didn't commit. When it finally went to trial, the prosecuting team didn't have enough concrete evidence against me, and the charges ended up being dropped. While I was grateful to have the accusations rescinded, I was forever changed after going through such a horrific experience. My perspective on dating, women, and trust would never be the same. Afterwards, I tried going to therapy and getting back into a normal routine, but I struggled with PTSD from the whole ordeal. I became hypervigilant about every woman I interacted with, constantly worrying if they would turn on me or fabricate claims like Emily did. Even years later, I still have issues developing romantic relationships and opening myself up fully to someone new. That Tinder date gone wrong cost me my career, my mental health, and my faith in believing things will just work out for the best. I'm trying to move forward and not let the past control my future, but it's a process. That nightmare experience is something I will never forget, and it changed the course of my life forever. Even with therapy and time, the scars still linger under the surface. I can only hope others don't have to endure the same horrors I did after putting myself out there in the modern dating world. It had been about a week since I matched on Tinder with this girl named Lindsay. We hadn't talked much over that time, just exchanging a few casual messages saying, hey, or what's up. I didn't really know anything substantial about her other than her first name and the fact she had stressed she wasn't looking for hookups or a serious relationship. Lindsay said she was just on Tinder to expand her social circle and meet new people to casually hang out with. That sounded perfectly fine to me, as I was open to making new connections and friends. So I'll admit I was a little surprised when late Saturday night, Lindsay messaged me out of nowhere asking if I wanted to meet up. We hadn't had any deep or meaningful conversations yet at that point. I still felt she was a complete stranger despite our brief chats over the week, but I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, so despite my reservations about her still being an unknown entity, I agreed to her last-minute plan. She asked if I could pick her up and drive to a pub not far away that she liked. When we got there, I noticed there was a 2,000 rupee cover charge per couple to get in. Being a gentleman, I paid for the both of us without hesitation or thought. At the time, I figured it was a small price to pay for what I hoped would be a fun night out getting to know someone new. We settled into a cozy table and started off with a round of drinks to loosen up. The conversation was polite enough but stayed relatively surface level, neither of us revealing much personal information just yet. As we continued with a second round, I realized I didn't have my wallet on me or any cash for that matter. In my rush to get out of the house after her last-minute invitation, I had left without my wallet, unaware most places were now cash only due to the recent demonetization. I casually asked Lindsay if she might have any cash on hand so we could buy another round of drinks or some cigarettes, but she replied no, that unfortunately she didn't have any cash either. As the night wore on, I gradually noticed a pattern starting to emerge with Lindsay's behavior that gave me pause. This same girl who had initially claimed she just wanted to innocently meet new friends was happily ordering more and more lavish cocktails and appetizers, letting everything pile up on my bill without a second thought. And mind you, this was our first time even meeting each other in person. She barely knew my last name. I started to feel a creeping sense of irritation at being taken advantage of by someone I had literally just met. The generosity I had first shown by paying our cover charges and her first drink now felt like that she was exploiting. After another couple of rounds of drinks, with the beer starting to hit me, I decided I had to say something before our tab really got out of hand. How were you planning to pay me back for your share? I asked her point blank. Lindsay looked back at me, seemingly shocked and appalled that I would dare ask about my own money being spent. She replied indignantly that she had just naturally assumed this was a typical date night out between a man and woman, and therefore I, as the man, was expected to generously and chivalrously cover any expenses she incurred over the course of the evening. I frankly told her that I had never agreed to blindly foot the open-ended bill for a virtual stranger's increasingly exorbitant food and drinks orders. As a modern, independent woman in the 21st century, I asked, wasn't she perfectly capable of paying for her own items that she herself had ordered all night? I suggested we could simply split the bill down the middle to cover what each of us had consumed. She immediately became defensive at this notion, doubling down that dates inherently just included these kinds of costs for the man, and that I should already know and embrace that long-standing social expectation without complaint. She indignantly grabbed her purse, saying if I was really going to be so insultingly rude as to ask separate checks after initially offering to cover her, she would rather just leave right then so I could thoroughly enjoy the rest of this lovely night by yourself. I calmly told her she was free to go if she truly thought it fair or reasonable to stick me with the entire surprisingly hefty tab we had managed to run up so quickly. I had no desire to continue an evening with someone who thought a virtual stranger should foot the bill for her expensive tastes. I stayed behind and, truth be told, enjoyed the rest of the night alone without the pretense, having a few more affordable drinks and taking in the live band playing. I was perfectly content and relaxed in my own company rather than feeling used. In retrospect, the evening was extremely illuminating about Lindsay's true character. This girl that first claimed she just wanted to innocently make new platonic friends and expand her social circle. But in reality, her actions later that night, pushing to go to an upscale bar, dressing up, ordering pricier cocktails and menu items without regard for cost, expecting me to pay without discussion, told a very different story than her original stated intentions. She clearly had seen me as an old-fashioned gentleman who she could take advantage of by invoking outdated notions of chivalry and a man always paying on an ambiguous date. When I asked an honest question about paying for her extravagant consumption, she became immediately angry and indignant, as if I had morally offended her by daring to broach the topic. It was clearly an act on her part meant to exploit me without care or concern for prices on a night she thought would be free. I'm proud of how I ultimately handled the uncomfortable situation. I stood up for myself when I sensed disingenuous behavior rather than ignoring the red flags in the name of old-fashioned chivalry or worry about causing offense. I spoke my mind, and that in turn revealed her superficial motives and entitled nature. She had counted on me feeling too much pressure as a man to actually ask her to pay her share, despite us barely knowing each other and her ordering as if money was no object. Don't let yourself be manipulated by those playing on your politeness or gender roles. Trust your instincts, even if it means confronting hard truths about people's real intentions. This was undoubtedly a valuable lesson that people's stated good intentions don't always match their real ones. Actions and reactions ultimately speak louder than just words. Judge people by their character, not simply by their gender or your outdated assumptions. It all started with an innocent right swipe on a dating app. His rugged yet intellectual profile photo first caught my eye, sparking an instant virtual connection. We bonded for months through daily messages about life, dreams, favorite books. He felt familiar yet exciting, a kindred spirit in text form. So when he finally asked me to dinner after 6 months of constant messaging, I joyfully accepted, giddy with anticipation to meet this man who had captivated me sight unseen. The morning of the long-awaited date arrived, and I meticulously prepared, eager to look my best. I styled my hair just right, nails perfectly polished, makeup applied with precision. After mixing and matching potential outfits for over an hour, I finally settled on an elegant black dress that complemented my figure and strappy heels to match. A spritz of my favorite perfume before heading out the door, hoping he found me just as beautiful in person as the selfies I had sent. My nerves and excitement mingled as I rode the elevator down to meet the man behind the charming messages that had brightened my days over so many months of virtual connection. Right on time, he pulled up outside my apartment building. I greeted him with a warm hug. Thankfully, he looked exactly as in his dating app photos, those same kind, intelligent eyes and handsome grin that had first caught my attention through the screen. We drove to the upscale restaurant where he had made reservations while conversation flowed easily about work, hobbies, pets, all the minutiae that builds intimacy between relative strangers. His adventurous travel stories had me giggling the whole ride over, any first date nerves vanishing within minutes. Witty, thoughtful, attentive, he exceeded every hope I had built up over half a year of messaging. I found him just as captivating in real life as through a screen. But shortly after being seated in the elegant restaurant, the first inklings of unease arose. An unsettled feeling churned in my stomach, despite his entertaining stories told over appetizers. I brushed it off at first, blaming nerves, but soon nausea overwhelmed me. My once delicious seared scallops now turned my stomach. The clinking silverware and murmur of voices suddenly too much stimulation. I profusely apologized while discreetly rushing to the restroom, utterly embarrassed at my body's inexplicable betrayal on our much-anticipated first date. He graciously paid the check as I promised I'd make it up to him. Oddly, the gentle motion of his car settled my stomach on the drive home. My mysterious ailment vanished just as quickly as it came. Still hoping to salvage the evening after our dinner disaster, I spontaneously invited him upstairs for tea and more conversation. He hesitated before agreeing to come up for a bit, seeming unsure. Just wanting a chance to explain away my body's bewildering reaction, I led him inside my apartment, internally cringing at the disastrous first impression. But as soon as we entered my living room, another intense wave of nausea washed over me. He politely made his exit so I could rest and recover, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. I sank into the couch, miserable at this comedy of errors, while profusely apologizing yet again. After changing into comfy pajamas, I quickly drifted off, thoroughly exhausted from the evening's strange events. I jolted awake a few hours later to peculiar noises from downstairs. My weary confusion shifted to alarm as I realized someone was inside my home. My heart pounded wildly as I frantically dialed 911, pleading for quick help. But the officers who arrived assured me the front door remained securely locked. They logically deduced I had merely conjured the frightening sounds in a semi-conscious, dreamlike state. Yet their reasonable explanation did nothing to calm the ominous chill creeping down my spine. Every instinct screamed danger lurked inside, no matter how implausible. I desperately implored the officers to knock down the door and investigate. With great reluctance, they finally heeded my frantic pleas, if only to reassure my frightened imagination. As soon as their flashlights pierced the dark space, the horror came into full view. My once warm and welcoming home had become a house of nightmares. Thick plastic sheeting lined the walls and furniture like a sinister murder scene. And in my kitchen lay a hammer and saw, seemingly innocuous yet so sinister given the context. The officers seemed as shocked as I, immediately calling for backup. That's when the horrific truth came to light after further investigation. That man, that monster, must have stolen my keys as he left that evening after I suddenly fell ill. He let himself back in under the cover of darkness once I fell unconscious. Lab tests later revealed an insidious cocktail of drugs in my system, enough to incapacitate even the strongest person. The twisted sociopath had slipped something in my drink at dinner when I wasn't looking. I shudder imagining what further sinister acts might have transpired if I hadn't awoken that fateful night to those bone-chilling sounds echoing in the darkness. What if I had ignored those noises that pierced my dream state? What if the officers dismissed my desperate pleas to investigate further? That deranged predator had planned unspeakable acts, welcomed right into my home, my life, my trust. In the traumatic aftermath, I deleted every dating app, keeping all new people at arm's length out of fear. I should have listened to my intuition that first night, seeing the subtle red flags amidst the charm and charisma. But hindsight is always clearer than in the hopeful moment. Now I stay vigilant, trusting my instincts over logic or desire for connection. Monsters walk among us in sheep's clothing, wolves masking as friends or lovers. But I won't repeat that horrific mistake born of loneliness. It left scars deeper than any visible wounds while teaching a valuable lesson. When in doubt, always trust your gut over your heart. I still have nightmares of hands around my throat, muffled screams, pleading eyes. Therapy helps reconcile my logic with still fractured intuition. Each day brings more light to pierce the lingering shadows. But caution remains a shield, keeping darker demons at bay. I know danger is the exception, not the rule. Most people are kind of hard, harmless as does. In time, I may open myself to love again. But first comes reinforcing those boundaries meant to protect my home, my heart, my very life. The monsters already took too much. I won't readily relinquish what remains. I was feeling excited but nervous as I unlocked my apartment door and gave it one final tidy-up sweep before Tara arrived. We had matched on Tinder a few weeks prior and hit it off immediately through constant messaging. Tonight would be our first time meeting in person after days of building an online connection. I wanted everything to be perfect, but kept reminding myself not to get too attached to outcomes. Still, I couldn't help but hope that our great dynamic over text would translate into a romantic spark face-to-face. After showering and choosing a nice outfit, I spent the next hour preparing Tara's favorite meal according to our conversations: veggie lasagna with garlic bread and a fresh salad. I carefully set the small dining table with my best plates and a small floral centerpiece. I dimmed the lights to set a warm ambience and queued up a playlist of bands we both liked. With everything ready, I glanced at my watch nervously and tried to busy myself with tidying invisible dust while waiting for Tara's scheduled 7 p.m. arrival. Right on the dot, I heard a knock at the front door. I took a deep breath and did a final check of my appearance in the mirror before opening it to see Tara for the first time. She looked just as beautiful as her photos, with long dark curls and striking green eyes. We exchanged brief hugs and slightly awkward hellos before I welcomed her inside. I offered to take her coat and purse while trying not to stare too obviously. Tara complimented the decor and aromas as I led her to the dining room, visibly relaxing me with her warm smile and graciousness. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily, much like our messaging had. We discovered overlaps in our families, pop culture favorites, senses of humor, and future goals that made it feel as if we had known each other for ages. As we ate, Tara told animated stories about her close-knit siblings and eccentric aunts, while I shared funny tales from college escapades with my best friends. 2 hours passed in what felt like minutes as we lost ourselves in captivating discussion. Any earlier nerves had vanished as we both realized what an unexpected connection we shared. After eating, we moved to the living room with glasses of wine and continued our wide-ranging chat. We shifted fluidly between deeper talk of past relationships, lessons learned, and hardships overcome to laughing at shared observations and childhood memories. I was really struck by how quickly we could communicate complex thoughts and feelings or just be silly and enjoy the simpatico humor. In the middle of the story, Tara's face suddenly flushed as she stopped speaking abruptly. She conveyed that she urgently needed to use the restroom, so I pointed her down the hall and she hurried off looking embarrassed. 15 quiet minutes passed before I grew concerned about her continued absence. Just as I considered gently knocking to check she was okay, the door opened and Tara emerged looking completely mortified. It was apparent that she had an accident and soiled herself. She seemed to feel she should leave immediately. My eyes widened in surprise, but I tried to remain calm and compassionate, sensing her intense discomfort. I sought to reassure her it was really no problem and accidents happen sometimes. When she conveyed apologies again profusely, I promised it was not an issue at all and suggested she hand over the clothes so I could wash them right away and make her comfortable again. She seemed hesitant, but I promised it was not a problem. I fetched some clean sweatpants and an oversized tee for her to change into and pointed her back to the bathroom. While Tara changed, I hurried to start washing her clothes, determined to preserve her dignity by not making a big deal about the situation. When she emerged timidly in the fresh clothes, she perched on the edge of the couch looking deeply embarrassed. She expressed regret that she may have ruined the evening, but appreciation for my kindness. Hoping to help her relax, I gave her hand a gentle, reassuring squeeze and sought to reassure her not to feel bad. We resumed our earlier chatting, moving the subject to lighter topics to help get her mind off the uncomfortable incident. About half an hour later, I suddenly felt an intense cramping and nausea in my own stomach. I realized to my horror that I urgently needed to get to the bathroom before I had an accident of my own. I awkwardly excused myself and rushed off, only to emerge shortly after equally mortified as Tara had been earlier. It appeared I was suffering from a bout of food poisoning. Tara looked at me with surprise and growing understanding as I shamefully explained what had just happened. To my disbelief, she gave me a sympathetic smile and conveyed she could put my clothes in the wash so I would feel better. I nodded gratefully at her compassion and handed her my soiled outfit before changing into fresh clothes for my bedroom. When I came back out, Tara patted the spot next to her on the couch, conveying we were two peas in a pod and laughing sympathetically. We both expressed amusement at the absurd situation we now found ourselves in. As awkward and uncomfortable as it was, I was touched by how understanding and caring Tara was being. We decided our dinner was definitely over, so I brewed us some chamomile tea to soothe our upset stomachs. As we sat sipping it on the couch, I marveled at how at ease I felt even after such an embarrassing incident on a first date. Tara's humor and grace put me totally at comfort. We moved on to chatting about easy topics like favorite childhood memories and pop culture, just enjoying each other's company. Too soon it was time for Tara to head home. I thanked her sincerely for being so compassionate and conveyed truthfully that I had a wonderful time despite the chaotic ending. I joked that this would definitely make for quite the first date story down the road. We exchanged numbers with plans to meet again soon before hugging goodbye. As I closed the door behind her, I couldn't help but smile thinking about the wild ride of our first date. Despite the messy mishaps, our natural connection and laughs made the evening feel like a success. I contemplated what an unusual way to bond and begin a relationship. Still, I felt optimistic about where this newfound chemistry could lead. Hard as it was to imagine a more disastrous first date, I was already eagerly looking forward to our next. I was feeling optimistic when I matched with Stefan on Tinder. His photos showed a handsome, well-dressed man with a bright smile. His bio mentioned a successful career in finance along with witty quips that made me laugh out loud. After a few flirty messages back and forth, I was already smitten. Here was a guy who was cute, funny, and seemed to have his life together. We exchanged numbers and planned our first date at a trendy new bistro downtown. I spent an embarrassing amount of time getting ready, giddy with excitement about this potential Prince Charming I discovered online. The date went even better than I imagined. Stefan was charming and attentive in person. He asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested as I talked about my job, friends, and interests. I was a little disappointed when he avoided specifics when I asked about his work and upbringing, but I figured he preferred keeping things light in the early stages. The conversation flowed smoothly all night, and I went home thrilled that we seemed to have undeniable chemistry. Over the next several weeks, Stefan and I fell into an easy routine. We would meet up for dinner or drinks a couple times a week. On weekends, he started planning fun daytime activities too. Museum visits, long walks through the park, brunch with his friends who all seemed lovely. I was surprised at how quickly things were progressing. But Stefan made me feel so comfortable, like we'd known each other for years. He was always a gentleman too, paying for meals, walking me home late at night, and never pushing physically beyond kissing. He seemed genuinely interested in me as a person, not just a conquest. About a month into dating, Stefan invited me away for a weekend at his family's cabin upstate. I hesitated at first, worried it might be moving too fast, but he promised we'd have separate bedrooms and assured me it was just a chance to relax out of the city. When I excitedly told my friends, they all encouraged me to go for it. The morning we set out for the trip, I was giddy with excitement. Stefan picked me up in his shiny SUV with a warm smile and picnic basket packed for the ride. As we got on the highway heading north, he revealed he'd been telling his parents all about me and were eager to meet me. I was taken aback. Meeting parents seemed premature after just a month of casual dating, but we were staying at their cabin after all. The first red flag came about an hour into the drive, when conversation lagged and Stefan grew strangely quiet. I glanced over and was shocked to see silent tears streaming down his face. I asked gently if he was all right. He just shook his head as the tears kept falling. My heart was pounding as he pulled the SUV off to the side of the highway. Thoughts raced through my mind. Was he terminally ill or mentally unstable? After what felt like an eternity, he turned to me and choked out that he had just been released from prison after an 11-year sentence. I sat frozen in stunned disbelief as Stefan described the armed robbery he had committed when he was younger. He talked through tears about wanting to start fresh and live a normal life again. I just numbly nodded along, unsure how to process this revelation of the man I thought I was getting to know. Stefan kept rambling about feeling scared to re-enter society and how much he wanted to prove he could be better. When he mentioned meeting his parents again, I quickly feigned illness and insisted we turn around. The long drive back was torture, filled with unbearable silence. I kept imagining Stefan suddenly pulling onto some remote dirt road where no one would hear my screams. When we got home, I made up an excuse to leave as quickly as possible. I decided I would send Stefan a text ending things and never see him again. But the very next day he called me, apologizing for the awkward drive and asking if we could just start fresh. Again I said yes, unsure why I couldn't just cut him out of my life completely. Somehow we continued dating for almost 2 months after the traumatic trip. Stefan acted totally normal most of the time, almost too sweet at moments, like he was overcompensating. But in the back of my mind, I kept envisioning him morphing into a violent criminal. I was in constant fear that another breakdown would reveal even darker parts of his past. My friends were shocked that I didn't break up with him immediately after the prison confession. And honestly, so was I. But Stefan could also be so charming and vulnerable that I believed he was trying to change. I thought I could help him lead a better life if I just gave him a chance. Of course, deep down I knew that was ridiculous. Stefan had already lied to me repeatedly and was clearly unstable. No healthy relationship could be built on that foundation. After weeks of anxiety constantly gnawing at me, I worked up the courage to end things over what started as a romantic dinner one evening. To my relief, Stefan took the news graciously and politely, but I slept with pepper spray on my nightstand for weeks afterwards, fearing he might come seeking violent retribution. In the sober light of day, I was able to see how I ignored blatant red flags about Stefan's secretive past and questionable stability. I vowed to be much more cautious about who I chose to meet online moving forward. In hindsight, I'm still not sure why I stayed with Stefan for so long after that bizarre road trip revelation. It must have been a combination of loneliness and morbid curiosity about his past life. but I'm grateful I got out of the relationship unharmed before digging myself any deeper into his chaotic world. This experience taught me important lessons: to trust my instincts, watch for red flags early on, and lead at the first sign of fundamental dishonesty. Stefan may have charmed me initially, but once those masks started slipping, I should have headed for the hills immediately. Instead, I stuck around hoping for some dramatic redemption story that was never going to come. At least now I can quickly spot the unreliable men online and not waste time giving them second chances. I have been chatting with this girl I matched with on Tinder for a few weeks before we finally decided to meet up in person. She seemed nice enough over text. We bonded over our shared love of obscure indie bands and horror films. I was looking forward to our first date, wondering if we'd have the same quirky chemistry in real life. We met at a cafe downtown on a sunny Saturday afternoon. I arrived early and grabbed a table outside to wait. When she walked up, I immediately noticed her style: bright red lipstick, kitty glasses, and a vintage rockabilly dress. Her long hair was styled in perfect retro waves. I could tell she took her personal aesthetic very seriously. We exchanged slightly awkward hellos and launched into our usual conversations about music and movies. Things seemed to be going well until a waiter came by. He accidentally bumped her elbow, spilling a bit of her lemonade onto the skirt of her dress. I saw her eyes flash with anger for a split second before she composed herself and reassured the mortified waiter it was fine. But I could tell by her tense body language that she was seething on the inside. I started to feel uncomfortable but brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just having a bad day. After we finished out at the cafe, I suggested checking out a nearby record store I thought she'd like. As we browsed through the stacks of vinyl, she seemed to relax and return to her previous upbeat mood. I began feeling relieved, thinking the incident at lunch must have been a fluke. On our way out, I asked if she felt like catching a movie or maybe getting a drink. I thought I'd see if she wanted to extend our date since things were going smoothly again. But before she could respond, her face changed. She suddenly looked upset once more. I followed her gaze down to the hem of her dress, where a small tear had developed. She must have snagged it on something without realizing. I tried to reassure her it was barely noticeable, but I don't think she heard me over the rising tide of her anger. In a burst of rage, she shoved the display nearest to her, sending records scattering across the floor. The cashier looked over in alarm, but seemed hesitant to confront her. Taking her hand firmly, I led her outside to try and calm her down. I asked if she was okay, letting her know it was just a minor wardrobe malfunction and the day could still be salvaged. But she was clearly in no mood to be reasonable. As we stood facing each other on the sidewalk, she reared back and slapped me hard across the face. I staggered back in shock, feeling the stinging imprint of her palm spread across my cheek. I asked her to please take a deep breath, suggesting we just call it a day and go our separate ways. But she was frighteningly irrational at this point. As I tried to turn and walk off, she grabbed the back of my shirt and yanked me backwards. I lost my balance and fell hard on the concrete sidewalk. Dazed, I looked up to see her glaring down at me, eyes wild. Before I could react, she drew back her heavy boot and kicked me in the stomach. The wind rushed out of my lungs in a painful gasp. Curled on my side in agony, I wheezed out something about just needing space. Mercifully, she finally stormed off without another word. I lay there catching my breath for a few minutes before slowly rising to my feet. My middle throbbed with pain and my cheek still stung from the slap. I looked around furtively, worried she might come back and attack again. Limping to my car, I vowed to never go out with someone from Tinder again without getting to know them better first. In the following days, I replayed the date over and over, analyzing where things went wrong. At first, I thought her violent reactions were triggered by ruined clothing upsetting her. But in hindsight, I realized her obsessive appearance and vintage style disguised deeper instability. Maybe past trauma made her lash out when feeling upset or out of control. Ultimately, I decided to trust my gut instincts more when meeting someone new. I took a long break from dating to heal, both physically and mentally. When I eventually downloaded a dating app again, I made sure to have lengthy conversations before meeting in person. I asked questions to subtly screen for any red flags. If I got the sense someone had anger issues or seemed excessively volatile, I politely ended the chat. Safety became my priority. Of course, you can never fully predict how someone will behave face to face, but having some insight into their personality helps mitigate risk. I focus on getting to know people's values now, not just shared interests. Having compassion and emotional maturity matter more to me than appearances or musical taste. Though I'm cautious when meeting strangers, I haven't given up on finding love. That horrific incident showed me there are troubled people in the world, but living in fear only hands them power over you. I choose to have faith in humanity's potential for good. One day I hope to meet someone who shares that belief. We'll lift each other up through life's challenges with gentle patience and understanding. My soulmate is out there, I just have to remember to put wisdom before blind attraction. Each person is a complex blend of past and potential. I believe that if you enter new relationships with empathy and discernment, you increase the chances of finding someone wonderful. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.